My name is Marcus. I served in the United States Army. I'm a Desert Storm veteran.
Marcus is 61 years old, and he's a patient at a Veterans Affairs hospital in the Midwest. He's asked that we only use his first name and not reveal the VA where he gets his medical care.
I was serving the country. It was over in the African continent. I really can't go into much detail with that.
Like a lot of Gulf War veterans, Marcus was exposed to toxic smoke from burn pits during his deployment. Picture massive open-air fires, some as large as a football field. It's how the military disposed of its trash: mounds of plastic, chemicals, munitions, and even amputated limbs were burned. Shortly after leaving the Army, Marcus started to feel sick. He went to his local VA to get checked out.
It was harder to breathe. I was doing the coughing, the fatigue. They basically told me, yeah, you had sarcoidosis.
Sarcoidosis is a condition that causes the immune system to overreact and can form lumps in the lungs. Many patients have difficulty breathing and can also have vision problems, chest pain, and skin rashes. The U.S. military acknowledges that there's a connection between exposure to the burn pits and various cancers and lung diseases, including sarcoidosis.
I enter the military healthy. You get what I'm saying? To come out and to discover a lot of these things I have is frustrating.
About a decade ago, Marcus took a lung function test with a device called a spirometer. That's when doctors found that he had an additional respiratory illness, COPD, or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, another condition common among veterans. At that time, Marcus was diagnosed with a mild case of COPD, but his symptoms didn't feel mild, and over the next decade, he continued to get worse.
I used to get up and walk, exercise. Now it's limited because of the fact that it's hard for me to breathe. It's hard for me to stand. It's hard for me to do the things that I was doing. It's limited.
Marcus had not had a breathing test in many, many years.
This is Natasha, a primary care doctor Marcus met at the VA.
I brought to his attention that he may be one of those people where he would benefit from having his pulmonary function test redone.
Natasha also asked that we not use her last name. I'll explain why a little later. She's a passionate advocate for patients, encouraging them to get their lungs retested with a new race-neutral spirometer. The test Marcus took 10 years ago was race-corrected. It used an algorithm that assumed Black patients have lower lung capacity than white patients.
The results are not reflecting what is happening to the veteran who is Black. And so the reason this was important for Marcus is because Marcus kept expressing how something just wasn't right with the way he felt, that there may be more that could be explaining his symptoms.
The spirometer test is a standard way doctors diagnose lung disease. But as we explored in our last episode, factoring race in these tests can result in underdiagnosis and harm to Black patients. I sat down with Marcus and Natasha and asked them to walk me through his case.
You were really frustrated about the fact that you had symptoms that weren't getting better.
Right.
And so you were trying to follow all the doctor's orders, go to all the appointments, all the labs, but you still left feeling like you didn't have all the answers to explain what was going on.
Well, yes, I remember going and taking these breathing tests. It was frustrating for me to go in there knowing that I got the symptoms, and I'm using the common sense theory. This is me. If it looks like a duck, quack like a duck, it's a duck.
Natasha was concerned that Marcus didn't have the correct diagnosis. With her encouragement, he went in for new lung function testing. And sure enough, that race-neutral test showed that Marcus's COPD and his sarcoidosis had been more serious this whole time.
It's worth pointing out that he's had 10 years of these symptoms without a test showing the evidence that he had disease. And If you do not have a proper diagnosis, you do not have access to the proper medications to make you feel better. You don't have access to the specialists who are the experts in disease control. You are left with symptoms that are unresolved and become a mystery because they are not being detected with the ordinary test.
But this is not just about medical care. It's also about money. Thousands of dollars in disability payments that Marcus and other Black veterans may be owed by the VA. When Natasha explained all this to Marcus, he felt betrayed.
You ask yourself that three-letter word, why? Why race should be a part of this?
This is The Race Equation, a special series from the New England Journal of Medicine. I'm Rachel Gottbaum. When I started researching this series about how race is programmed into medical tools, I didn't grasp how pervasive this practice is, or how entrenched into medicine the idea is that Black bodies are biologically different from white bodies. In our previous episode, we traced the history of the spirometer all the way back to the slavery era. And even though the belief that Black people have naturally lower lung capacity has largely been debunked, the majority of spirometers in the United States still use a different equation for Black patients. And the consequences are profound, especially for veterans.
So my name is Peter Sporn. I am a professor of medicine at Northwestern University, Feinberg School of Medicine. I'm also a staff physician at the Jesse Brown VA Medical Center here in Chicago, Illinois. We can't speak to the media on behalf of the VA. So I'm not speaking to you on behalf of the VA.
I called Dr. Peter Sporn because he's a critical care pulmonologist who has cared for military veterans for decades. And after hearing Marcus's story, I wanted to know the full extent of how Black veterans are being impacted by the race-corrected spirometer. The Jesse Brown VA stretches along a busy city block in Chicago. More than 60,000 veterans get their medical care there. And it's where Peter and his colleagues realized something was very wrong.
We're doing this lung testing like this, and it's not scientific, and it's hurting patients.
Dr. Cheryl Connor is one of those colleagues.
I'm a clinical associate professor at the University of Illinois at Chicago. However, today I'm speaking for myself and not on behalf of the VA.
Cheryl Connor read historian Loon DuBron's work, who we heard in the last episode, highlighting the racist origins of lung function tests, and she immediately thought about her own patients.
We're one of the few VAs in the country that has a majority Black veteran patient population. So yes, I take care of a lot of sick Black veterans.
Cheryl and Peter could see that using race correction in lung tests was underdiagnosing respiratory disease in their Black patients. So they decided to do something about it.
And in August of 2022, our VA started using a race-neutral equation because we realized it was the right thing to do.
With Peter and Cheryl's advocacy, the Jesse Brown VA became one of the first hospitals in the country to stop using race in lung function testing. Soon after, they convinced 7 other VAs in the Midwest to make the switch too. Most of the Black veterans Peter Sporn and Cheryl Connor treat live below the poverty line. They often struggle to manage their illnesses and to pay their bills. Cheryl Connor says once race was removed from their pulmonary function tests, she and her colleagues had an epiphany. The race correction wasn't just harming the health of their Black patients, it was also hurting them financially.
Compensation and pension uses specific PFT numbers to determine the amount of money that veterans get if they have a lung-related disability.
In other words, the pulmonary function tests, or PFTs, are the same tests the VA uses to determine if a sick veteran qualifies for monthly disability benefits and how much money they get.
That was a big problem.
Applying for military benefits is a complex process. A veteran's symptoms need to be diagnosed and then directly linked to their service. That might be done by their primary care doctor. But then to qualify for monthly compensation, a whole different group of doctors has to review the medical records. These are clinicians who don't have a one-on-one relationship with the veteran. And the decision to approve or deny compensation can come down to the results of the lung function test. Natasha, the doctor at Marcus's VA, says there's a lot riding on that test score.
It's a hard cutoff. And if you meet a certain threshold, then you get more benefits, you get more resources.
I wondered what this would mean for Marcus, who served in the Gulf War. Now that he has new test results, Natasha is hopeful that Marcus will get better medical care and more money for his service-connected disease.
It would translate to more compensation, more disability.
For example, the difference between a mild case of COPD and a moderate one can increase monthly VA compensation from about $180 a month to around $550 a month. That translates into thousands of dollars a year that Marcus and other Black veterans may be entitled to, but aren't receiving because of a faulty test. At Natasha's urging, Marcus is applying for new benefits from the VA, but until his case is reviewed, all he can do is wait.
We got life out here. I mean, we got to pay the bills, we got to live. A lot of things that thrust upon us as being veterans, and it's frustrating. Not just me, and I'm just saying this in general. It may lead into suicide, it may lead into alcohol, it may lead into a whole lot of things because of the frustration with the trust of our doctors, or with the trust of the system, or the trust of the process.
Natasha understands Marcus's frustration because so much hinges on a correct diagnosis.
Not only does this translate to resources as far as medications and doctors, but also to money, to your ability to survive, whether or not you continue to work or not. And so it does have a lot of impact on your quality of living if you are unable to be recognized as having a disease.
Hundreds of thousands of Black veterans may be affected by race correction. In 2019, Natasha was doing rounds at the VA, and she checked in on a patient named Richard. At 69 years old, Richard was in the hospital with double pneumonia, the flu, and kidney failure.
All I know is that I woke up, looked up, and saw her face.
Oh, that's how we met.
And I'm like, wow, you pretty. I'm getting up out of here.
Richard and Natasha sat down to speak with me at a library near the local VA. Richard is proud of his military service. On this day, he was wearing a black leather cap with Vietnam veteran printed in big yellow letters. Richard said he enlisted in the Army in 1970.
Before I enlisted, I was really pretty healthy. I was running the 100-yard dash, and I was actively singing.
Richard was sent to Fort Polk, Louisiana for basic training. And that's where he said he was first exposed to toxic chemicals in a tear gas training exercise. He says the soldiers were being taught how to respond in case of an enemy attack, but some had pushed him into the gas house without a mask.
I didn't have any protection at all. No gas mask, nothing. And they closed the door on me. Made sure I stayed in there a few minutes. I come out gagging and all that kind of stuff. I think the gas had a lot to do with me getting cysts all over my face.
Richard says after basic training, he was sent to Vietnam. His battalion found themselves fighting on a mountain for 6 days. That's when he says planes flew overhead, dropping napalm on the enemy.
You could feel the heat. It's like throwing you in a fire. And when it hits the enemy, it automatically vaporized them. Just whoosh. And they're on fire. The whole area is on fire. Everything is burnt up. Everything was burnt.
After Richard finished his military service in 1976, he went to the VA to have the cysts on his face treated. Years later, when he turned 60, he was diagnosed with mild COPD by a private doctor. And then in 2019, Richard was diagnosed with lung cancer. He began radiation and chemotherapy treatments. And last year, Richard was told he's cancer-free. But he says he's still having trouble breathing.
They told me that it was part of the lung cancer and it would get better, but it didn't.
Just like she did with Marcus, Natasha encouraged Richard to get a new race-neutral lung function test to see what was going on and to find out if he might be eligible for more benefits. Natasha explains his test results.
So it looks like he's had severe disease this whole time, and we're encouraging him to go reapply because you do qualify for benefits, is what we see.
At 76 years old, Richard moves a little slower these days, but he's determined to stay on top of his medical care, and he wants to reapply for benefits. But the reality is the benefits process falls on the shoulders of the veterans themselves, and that can be overwhelming.
Until you get all of your records. I went to records and they gave me 2 shopping bags for the records. Now, how do you expect me to go through all that and understand it? There's a lot of medical terms. I don't know what they're talking about.
Richard's been poring over those records with Natasha's help, and he hopes to get VA compensation for his COPD. We've been speaking for a few hours at this point, and Richard has to head out. The auto show is in town, and today is free entry day for military veterans.
You're a busy guy. You're all over this city.
Well, that's what keeps me going.
Richard exits the library onto the windy sidewalk. He turns up the fur collar on his wool coat and heads toward the bus stop. After about a block, he pauses.
I'm going to have to stop talking because I'm kind of running out of breath. That's one thing. You got to catch your breath. You got to stop talking, and you could be in an intimate type of conversation where you get into the nitty-gritty of something, and you got to stop talking because you just run out of breath.
Richard takes a puff of his inhaler, and a woman notices his Vietnam veteran hat.
Your service. Oh, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. We do get that. Thank you for your service.
Back at the Jesse Brown VA in Chicago, Doctors Peter Sporn and Cheryl Connor say they're seeing more Black veterans diagnosed with lung disease now that they use race-neutral testing. But nationally, 70% of Veterans Affairs hospitals are still using race to measure lung function. And that doesn't seem right to Peter and Cheryl.
We raised with the VA nationally that we should do this on a nationwide basis.
They made their case, but the VA said no.
They've declined to adopt our recommendation, and they've said we're going to keep everything the way it is.
The VA said that hospitals that had already moved to race-neutral testing, like the ones in the Midwest, could continue. But in 2024, the agency banned any additional VAs from making the switch.
In other words, freeze everybody where you're at.
But why would the VA do that? The agency says it needs to better understand the benefits and the harms of switching. One of the VA's major concerns is that going to a race-neutral test could actually reduce the number of Black veterans who are candidates for lung cancer surgery. Cheryl and Peter say they understand the VA's concern, but they're frustrated.
We agree that it needs further study, but we didn't think that was a reason for not abandoning the unscientific and clearly inferior use of race-specific equations. We felt that was a real abdication of responsibility.
The harms of staying race-based are that we are going to be underestimating and potentially undertreating our Black veterans with lung disease. It's unscientific. It just isn't based in reality. So we should stop doing it.
I asked the VA to speak with me, but they declined. That's not the end of the story. Not long after the VA issued its freeze, the New England Journal of Medicine came out with a new study. It found that if the VA switched to race-neutral testing in all of its hospitals, it could owe Black veterans more than $1 billion in increased benefit payments every year. That's because more than 400,000 Black veterans could be reclassified as having more severe lung disease. But Dr. Peter Sporn says it's not just about the money. There are other major implications.
Some white patients could potentially lose eligibility or get less benefits.
The study also showed that white veterans could lose about $500 million in benefits each year if a switch is made. The VA says it disagrees with the study's results. The agency claims that the researchers overestimated the number of veterans who might be impacted and the amount that their benefits might change. I asked Peter Sporn and Cheryl Connor what they thought about the VA's position.
We don't want anybody to lose economic benefits. And it's not our position to recommend how policymakers should institute these changes, but race-neutral equations would actually lessen economic inequality.
Peter and Cheryl are researching how removing race from the spirometer could impact their patients in Chicago financially. They've found that even a small increase in payments would significantly improve the lives of Black veterans. This is all happening in the context of a federal ban on diversity and equity programs. To comply with the federal government's directive, the patient advocacy work Natasha and other VA doctors had been doing around race-based testing has been shut down.
Any focus on topics of equity, diversity, inclusion are prohibited.
The ban has caused a chilling effect among doctors at the VA, which is why Natasha would only allow us to use her first name. But she is always thinking about her patients.
Veterans are suffering unnecessarily, and so we owe it to our patients to care for them, not just based on the color of their skin.
For his part, Gulf War veteran Marcus is trying to make sense of how his race has prevented him and so many other Black veterans from being accurately diagnosed and fairly compensated for so long.
Let's solve this issue. Let's knock this out. Let's get it exposed. Plain and simple, it's wrong. Why race have to play a factor of this? Only thing I see is veterans.
Next time on The Race Equation, what happens when race is critical to diagnosis? We look at the pulse oximeter, a device used in hospitals every day to measure a patient's oxygen levels. But are people dying because it gives faulty readings on darker skin?
The pulse oximeter did not back up how sick I was. And I knew I'd end up either coming back in an ambulance or worse.
It was devastating. I started calling every doctor that I know, asking them, how could I have missed this?
Maybe I could have done something differently because of someone's skin color. That's a hard thing to admit.
The Race Equation is a special series from the New England Journal of Medicine. This series is reported by me, Rachel Gottbaum. Our senior producer is Catherine Fenolosa. Our editor is Sarah Kate Kramer. Sound design by James Trout. Andrea Lopez Cruzado is our fact checker. We had help from Dr. Aaron Baugh, Dr. Winfred Williams, Christine Gwynn, Adam Strauss, and Leocadia Marchwinski. Funding for this series is provided by the Doris Duke Foundation, committed to building a creative, equitable, and sustainable future.